Hello, friends. Are you looking for enlightening, thought-provoking, entertaining films? Check out my films, Occult Louisiana, available on Tubi, and Doors of Perception, available now on Amazon Prime.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Derrick Broze. First, I am excited to announce the 4th annual Forbidden Gathering in Fort Collins, Colorado, September 12th through 14th. You are all invited. We will once again be having a 3-day celebration and gathering of free thinkers, truth, and high strangeness seekers. We're going to be having celebrations, food, live podcasts, and a hike through the majestic North Colorado mountains. If you would like to attend, please RSVP to forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com with subject gathering for more details, and you can reserve your place at the event. It's completely free to attend, but it will be a potluck, so we request that each party attending bring food, drink, or party supplies to contribute. We really hope to see you all there. Again, that is September 12th through 14th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Email forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com with subject gathering to RSVP and get more details. If you are ready to start your microdosing journey with the highest quality ingredients available, check out Brainsupreme. If you use the link right in the description, you're going to get 15% off your order so you can start your microdosing journey with Brainsupreme. We are booking guests for August. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. And right after you finish this show, go check out Doors of Perception on Amazon Prime if you haven't already. If you have, go check it out again. Also, you can watch my first film, Occult Louisiana, right now on Tubi and many other streaming platforms. Today, I want to welcome back to the show Derrick Broze. He is an author, journalist, documentary filmmaker, and activist based in Houston, Texas. In 2013, he founded the Conscious Resistance Network, a site dedicated to multimedia journalism that exposes corporate and governmental corruption while highlighting solutions. Derrick, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming back on. So much has happened since we last spoke. There's been an undeniable quickening of technological progression over the past few years, very little of which benefits humanity in any way. And I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was pretty easy to predict where we would be in the next 5 to 10 years, technologically and culturally. Now it's difficult to predict where we are from day to day. In my perspective, society has been manipulated and steered into this technocratic dystopia through a series of high-impact events and operations, Hollywood, mainstream media, and now social media and artificial intelligence. We're already at a point where it seems like AI is feeding into people's delusions, attempting to psychologically manipulate users. There is so much happening right now, and people are caught up in World War III and political theatrics. So lots to get to today. I know we only have an hour. Before we do, quickly remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I definitely agree with you on that analysis that the world is rapidly changing. It's definitely hard to predict where things are going. So my name is Derrick Broze. I'm an independent journalist. I've been doing journalism, activism for the last 15, going on 16 years. And I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I now live in Mexico. My website is called The Conscious Resistance Network at theconsciousresistance.com. That's where people can find my books I've written over the years. I've focused a lot on individual liberty as well as the sort of spiritual side of things. But also my most recent book is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which focuses a lot of, some of the topics you were touching on there. I am also the writer, researcher, producer of a 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power, which people can find and watch for free at thepyramidofpower.net. The final episode will be coming out very soon after we're recording this. And generally my work, it's my journalism, my activism, podcast, documentaries, books, public speaking, whatever it is, it's all focused on trying to empower humanity, educate people around me, myself, and then, of course, try to see what sort of solutions we might come up with the crazy world we're facing and all the things that we're facing right now.
Right on. Let's start with your thoughts on the progression of events that has led to this moment. I mean, we can even go back to World War II, JFK assassination, 9/11, COVID. These all seem to be stepping stones to where we're at right now. And then, of course, we always have the next big fear factor event that is the following stepping stone for whatever they want to come next. But how deep in it are we already? Are we beyond the point of no return when it comes to this technological dystopia? I think you're muted. I
Part
can't
of
hear
me
you.
feels like I'm sorry about that. Part of
Sure.
me feels like we are maybe beyond the point of no return because, things have advanced in terms of artificial intelligence, which is still very early on as far as the public facing operations go. I'm sure we could assume that military and intelligence have been using artificial intelligence behind the scenes way before the public ever saw it. And then, of course, things like facial recognition, ideas about social credit scores, the concept of digital IDs, which saw a big push during COVID 1984 in the form of vaccine passports. All of these ideas have progressed pretty rapidly. And as we're recording this right now in the United States and in other countries around Western Europe and other parts of the world, are already testing things like facial recognition at the airports. Some places it's already mandatory. Some, like the US, it's still optional, although the vast majority of the public don't know that and they comply anyways. So I think almost at that point. I hesitate to say that it's too late because I don't want to give too black pilled of an analysis or a worldview, because I do think there's always steps that we can take. It doesn't mean that they're easy. I think that's kind of the trick, right? Is it too late to do something about it? Maybe not 100%, but we're getting close there. Will people actually do anything about it? That's a whole nother thing, because in my experience, most people just they would rather believe that voting is going to fix things, or that being apathetic and just checking out and not doing anything is somehow going to fix things, or they've stopped caring, or, they kind of think that it's hopeless. I don't think it's hopeless, but I do think we're getting pretty late in the game.
Mm. A lot of what has rolled out has been recently occurring with this administration. It's been rolling out for a very long time, but there seems to have been major progress just within the past year and few months with what this new administration is rolling out. And you mentioned the political theater and how people still believe that voting is going to solve these problems. Well, I think the wool was pulled over a huge portion of the population's eyes this past election. I have always been of the understanding that it is theatrics, that both sides are working towards the same goal with different agendas, different operations behind it. What is your analysis of Trump and what he really represents?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, as you said, that the wool has been pulled over many people's eyes. And specifically, I'll say a lot of people in the conspiracy research
Yeah.
community, the freedom community, truth, health, freedom, liberty, whatever you want to say, all these kind of intersecting and converging online and real world communities. I think that to me has been the biggest concerning thing I've seen over the last pretty much decade, because, for those who remember, it's like Trump appeared 10 years ago on the political scene. And even before that, he's always kind of played with this idea, even back to the 90s, of running for president one day. But in a serious way, in 2015, he like came down the golden escalator and, at CPAC and this whole thing. And then, of course, ran for election and won and became president. So we've been dealing with Trump on the scene for 10 years now. And then, of course, psychological operations like the QAnon stuff, which I definitely think is some level of psychological operation by different intelligence agencies, in order to craft a narrative that gets the people who would be most skeptical and I think most resistant, that being the people who are awake to the so-called New World Order, awake to these larger age-old agendas, and who are trying to resist them and expose them, create a narrative that captures a good chunk of those people and gets them to believe that this new character is the anti-establishment hero. You just have to trust him. You just have to support him, and he will fix all your problems. I think that's something we hadn't seen before. And it's really unfortunate, because I do think it has fractured the broader conspiracy community, because there are people today who are posting online every interpretation, everything they see. Like, for example, the Trump's bombing of Iran, they filter it through this kind of Q Trump savior lens. Yeah. And so it's always like, that's not what's really happening. What Trump is actually doing is he's doing this thing, and it's the 5D chess or the 30D chess or whatever, and just instead of taking the facts as they were and actually looking at Trump's actions and the things he's done and the things he says, which I've been reporting on since the beginning, this crowd wants to try to create a narrative that says everything he's doing is actually for a deeper secret purpose that actually serves the people. So pay no attention to the surface level things, because it's an op, and he has to do it quietly and secretly. Otherwise the deep state would stop him. But if you don't take that view and you just take the things as they are, and you look at what he's doing, as I said, and what he has said and done, now we have a whole administration. We have 10 years worth of his statements and his thoughts. We know that his involvement in the COVID 1984 operation, pushing the COVID shot, which he still brags about to this day and still claims is like this great public health achievement. And then now, of course, we're 6 months in. I mean, it's July 2nd, right? So we're 6 months into this second Trump administration, and we can see numerous connections, which I'm happy to outline, to the technocrats, via Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Palantir, Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, Zionists, just like the list goes on. And I don't think this should be of any surprise. I mean, I was writing articles in the fall of last year, warning people about this and saying, like, the writing's on the wall of who he's connected to. And it wasn't that, Kamala Harris was going to be better or something. It was that the whole system is controlled, and people were being duped again to think that if they supported Trump, they were somehow going to escape that.
Right. You mentioned his connection to the technocrats. This is an extremely important aspect that I'd like to explore a little bit. That, like you said, a lot of Trump supporters refuse to even acknowledge or pay attention to those relationships, which are extremely important. So talk a little bit about what we should be paying attention to there.
Yeah, so just for a brief background, in case there's anybody listening who's not familiar, when I'm talking about technocrats, I mean people who are, whether publicly stated or just through their actions, are believers in the technocratic belief in technocracy, which is a political philosophy and a political movement that was really popular in the 1930s and 1940s in the United States and Canada and parts of Western Europe, that basically said that democracy, rule by the people, which some of us think is more like mob rule, that democracy wasn't working, but also that the business class, the capitalist class, they weren't solving the world's problems. And so instead, the technocrats said, what we need to do is get rid of voting, get rid of the business class, and instead we would have the technocrats, the experts, the engineers, the scientific and technological engineers, and elite, as they would like to believe it, in charge of machines. Now, when they were talking about this almost 100 years ago, they didn't say artificial intelligence. They said we would use machines. But I think in our time, we would consider this to be using tools like artificial intelligence, facial recognition, etc. But the technocrats envisioned this world where voting was ended and the business class, as I said, wasn't making major decisions. Instead, they had what they called a technate, and the technate was like the governing body. And so they called for the North American technate. And this technate, interestingly enough, included a lot of what Donald Trump has called for. It included Canada, Mexico, as well as Panama and Greenland. And we know that Trump is trying to get Greenland from Denmark, and he's trying to annex Canada, or at least has talked about it. These plans perfectly align with the original plans of the technocrats. And the technocrats admitted that there would be a loss of individual liberties, privacy, freedom of movement, etc. They also talked about everybody would be using energy credits, which sounds very similar to what we've heard about in carbon credits and things like that. And so the movement was popular, and it sort of faded into, you know, the dustbin of history. At least that's what we're told. But in the 1970s, it actually had like a bit of a revival through deep state agent Zbigniew Brzezinski. He wrote a book called The Technotronic Era, Between America Between Two Ages, and he substituted the word technotronic for from technocratic, but he described the same thing: a global police state using technology to control and manipulate the masses, using pharmaceuticals as well, different things like that. And of course, Zbigniew Brzezinski was an advisor from to every president from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama. He was the founder, along with David Rockefeller, of the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission was born out of Columbia University, which is also the birthplace of technocracy. So I just share all that background to show, like, this has been a movement that has been in the background of our political philosophy. And the modern technocrats of today would be people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp. Exactly. These are people that are not elected to any governmental position, but they obviously wield a lot of power, clearly because of their wealth. These are billionaires, multi-billionaires, but also because they're involved in the tech industry. They have massive amounts of data on every single one of us, and that data can then be sold to governments. It can be sold to law enforcement or used in all kinds of different ways. So those are the technocrats of today. And another example, Bill Gates, you know, we know he's got massive wealth, but he is somebody who's unelected who can fund geoengineering programs, just as one example. And so he can help manipulate the weather, even though nobody voted on that. No government is even officially approved of that, publicly at least. And so they're outside of government, but they still have lots of power. And this technocratic ideal got big play during COVID 1984. All of the solutions that we saw, the so-called solutions, were technocratic solutions. Put facial recognition cameras everywhere, heat detection cameras. All of that was about how do we use technology to advance these goals. So it's not an anti-tech. It's not about being anti-technology. At least that's not the position I take. It's more about recognizing that there are people who are using these technological tools to try to enslave humanity, and many of them are directly in Donald Trump's cabinet. Namely, Peter Thiel is the big one to pay attention to. So I'll just give a few examples. J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, he was actually, his entire Senate campaign in Ohio was funded by Peter Thiel. I think it ended up being $21 million. It was the largest, and I think it still might be the largest single donation to a Senate candidate in the United States history. This was just a few years back. J.D. Vance before that was relatively unknown. He'd come from Yale University. He actually claimed that he heard Peter Thiel speak at Yale, and that became like a big inspiration for him. And he started working for some of Peter Thiel's firms. And then later, Peter Thiel funds him to run as a Senate candidate in Ohio. He writes this book called what is it? Something Hillbilly. And, you know, he's like super relatable. I'm just, Hillbilly Elegy. And in fact, Netflix made a movie out of it, which is a little unusual. So in my view, looking back, it's like this guy was handpicked, and he's being crafted and funded by Peter Thiel. His book goes viral. His movie about his life goes viral. And then a couple years later, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and some of these other technocrats are reported to have told Trump that Vance should be his VP candidate. And then that is exactly what happened. And Peter Thiel also funded Trump's first political campaign in 2016. And he didn't give this second time, but as I said, he pretty much put J.D. Vance where he is at. And we could go on into Elon Musk and others. Palantir, of course, more and more people are paying attention to Palantir recently. I actually have a mini documentary that people can find on my website or on my Twitter page. It's the pinned post. But if you go to theconsciousresistance.com and check out our documentaries, you can find a little mini documentary. It's like 15 minutes long that I did called Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, and the Technocrats. And I essentially go through and list all of the people at that time, and if I updated it now, there'd be more, but all the people we knew at that time that were being appointed to different positions in the Trump cabinet who have either worked directly for Peter Thiel or worked for Palantir, one of his other companies that he's funded. And it's also worth noting that Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, who are the co-founders of Palantir, the private surveillance firm that received its seed funding from the CIA, and which is basically a private version of the U.S. Total Information Awareness Program that came out after 9/11, that both Alex Karp and Peter Thiel are also steering committee members of the infamous Bilderberg Group, right? So you've got this company whose founders are sitting on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group, all up in the Trump cabinet, various players, but also Palantir's got contracts with ICE now. They're working with the IRS to make it more efficient. And on and on and on. I mean, and of course, Elon Musk's role. And despite any sort of like ongoing soap opera drama that's happening before the cameras about Elon and Trump not getting along, I just think that sort of stuff is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. At this point, Elon Musk already has enough contracts with the military industrial complex, which is what he really is. He's not some like self-made man. He wouldn't be this wealthy without the Starlink, which is the public version of his internet. The other side, the military side, is called Starshield. And then, of course, the Stargate announcement program a couple months ago. Elon Musk has built himself up via SpaceX, Starlink, Starshield, Tesla even. All these companies get huge government subsidies and tax breaks and, of course, contracts from the military industrial complex. And he wouldn't be able to survive without those. So whatever bickering they're doing on stage is irrelevant to what's actually happening, you know, in the bigger picture. And so if people were to go just continue to look at, you can look at my reports or the reporting of others like Whitney Webb and Ryan at The Last American Vagabond, have been showing like these different players that are deeply embedded in Trump's administration. There's also members of the World Economic Forum. There's ex-young global leaders who are part of the World Economic Forum as well. Of course, nearly everybody that he's chosen is outright, you know, strident Zionists who are supporting everything that Israel's doing. And of course, Israel and Palantir are working together to use AI to kill Palestinians and as well as others. And yeah, so you got technocrats, you got Zionists, you got World Economic Forum members, you got Bilderberg Group members. And these are the kinds of things that, as far as I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, man, maybe I'm just misremembering, but if Obama was doing this, I'm sure a lot of people would be raising hell about it and speaking up and saying, this is crazy. Can you see how deeply tied he is to the deep state? But since Trump's doing it, it's, I mean, there's just some people who completely ignore it. And it's really astounding.
Let's get into some of the things that are already occurring, already being implemented right under our noses. I know you covered the fact that they are swearing in these technocratic billionaires into the military, and there's this merger occurring right now, and this is going to be a huge foundation of what's to come. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is called Detachment 201, and I just learned about it pretty much on the day it happened. But basically, the U.S. Army specifically, this is the first one, under some initiative that they say is going to transform the U.S. Army. They have decided to officially swear in, like, and that means like these people are now officially soldiers, reserve soldiers at least, and the U.S. Army Reserve. They've decided to swear in 4 different big tech CEOs to make them lieutenant colonels, which is, you know, it's typically a position that somebody has to have been in the military for a couple of decades at least. You know, you don't just hand these positions out.
Not even basic training, man.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so these guys, they said they went through some type of training, but I mean, I think we can all imagine they didn't put them through the ringer of like the usual things somebody who's in that position might have had to go through. But you had Shyam Sankar, who's the chief technology officer for Palantir. So again, Palantir popping up. Andrew Bosworth, who's the chief technology officer for Meta, formerly Facebook. Kevin Weil, the chief product officer for OpenAI. And then another guy named Bob McGrew, who's the advisor at Thinking Machines Lab, and he also used to work for OpenAI. So you've got these executives from OpenAI, which OpenAI, Sam Altman, that company itself is under suspicion of killing one of their former employees who decided to come out as a whistleblower a few months back. And also, they're also involved in the OpenAI is doing the Stargate project that I mentioned earlier. Not to mention, Sam Altman's also funding the WorldCoin project, where they're getting people in, you know, in lower income countries to go stare into this orb, which is what they call it, to scan their retina and promising them they're going to give them, you know, universal basic income. So you got that company, OpenAI, and then Meta, of course, Facebook. We all know that they've been involved with spying on and manipulating people's emotions through their platform for over a decade. And then, of course, Palantir. So, I mean, just those companies and those associations alone, I think, should give people pause. But as you were hinting at, this is also kind of just another area that we hadn't seen before of this merging of big tech and government into, you know, like I said, I think it's technocracy. Some people are now calling it techno-feudalism, techno-fascism, techno-tyranny, but it's that bringing together of, and again, things that people a few years ago were opposing because it was the World Economic Forum, public-private partnerships. This is a public-private partnership. You have a public institution, which is people, funded by taxpayers, the U.S. military, working with private companies. And in this sense, it's not even just a partnership or it's a contract. They're taking their CEOs and saying, hey, you are now lieutenant colonels and have power in our military, which is just completely unprecedented. They did say that they had to do 2 weeks of online and in-person training, which would focus on physical fitness, marksmanship, and basic soldier tasks. I mean, I think we can all imagine they might have let these guys shoot some guns or something, but I doubt they put them through anything difficult or hard or really challenged them in any way. But nevertheless, this is where things are at. And I found it interesting. I wrote this in my article as well, that this announcement, it was a couple of Fridays ago, it came at the same time that the Bilderberg Group was meeting in Stockholm, Sweden. And again, the Palantir connection there, both Peter Thiel and Alex Karp are sitting in Sweden, steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group, while one of their CEOs is being sworn in as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. military. And of course, that same weekend is also when Israel decided to start bombing Iran. So there's just a lot of deep state stuff that's been happening in this sector, and it all relates to these big tech companies. It all relates to the technocracy, and that's what I think is the bigger picture of what is happening. Even right now, as we're recording this, there's this discussion on the Trump's big beautiful bill, which I'm refusing to call it that. I think people need to more correctly call it the Big Brother bill, because it's another bill that is just about advancing some of these same things I'm talking about, technological enslavement. And it's I think that is the big concern now. You asked me earlier, is it too late? Again, I don't think it's too late, but it's definitely not looking good.
Let's talk a little bit about the techniques that they're implementing to roll this out right under our noses. We have the immigration fiasco. This, with anyone that has eyes to see, you can step back and say, oh, this is going to be an excuse for surveillance technology and AI law enforcement and things like this. What are your thoughts on that?
That is 100% correct. I actually just released a new article this morning as we're recording about what I was just talking about, this Big Brother bill, which is Trump's, it's one of the things he's touting as like, this is his first big accomplishment of his new administration. He's going to pass this giant bill, 900-page bill that obviously most of the vast majority of the public hasn't read, and definitely hasn't read the 900 pages. And I would wager that the vast majority of the politicians who are pretending to serve us haven't read it either. But it does exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it does all kinds of things, and there's been a lot of different focuses people have been making as far as like, what's the worst part of the bill, or what are the things we should be concerned about. I'm always typically concerned about the surveillance aspect, because I do think surveillance is such a big thing that once it advances, it's really hard to turn it off and make it go away. I mean, we're kind of already at that point, like you were talking about earlier with the quickening and just how rapidly technology is advancing. Ultimately, we can't turn off AI. We can't turn off facial recognition, biometric data collection. This stuff exists, right? So somebody, even if I wouldn't even trust that if today they passed a law and said that facial recognition is now banned and the government promises they're never going to collect facial recognition data on you. How would we enforce that, right? How do we make sure that every camera that we're walking past, we would never know, does it have facial recognition software installed on it? We wouldn't know, right? We just have to trust. And so I don't know if there's any way to even fully stop it, but I definitely know that these things, we need to be paying attention to them. And I've been trying to focus on this for well over a decade now, because I have had my own personal experience with being under surveillance by the Houston Police Department. I found out that back in 2014, and that kind of led me to starting to investigate surveillance technology. And so I've kept my eye on it. One of the biggest things that this Big Brother bill that they're saying they need to pass by July 4th. So in the next couple of days, they're claiming it's going to pass and Trump's going to sign it. And I'm sure it's going to happen, some version of it. Whether or not it has the worst parts of what I'm about to share, we'll see. But I think a lot of bad stuff's going to end up in there. And a big chunk of it relates to AI, relates to facial recognition technology, and of course the border, the immigration fight that you were talking about. This has been, I think, the big role that Trump was brought in to play, is to kind of stoke that division. And of course, it's not just that Trump is the ultimate bad guy. Of course, he's just another puppet being used. And I know some people have trouble with that because he postures as such a, I do what I want and nobody can tell me what to do. But in reality, he's still in the back pocket of the Zionists, and he's still connected to the same network of people that have been running things for some time. He's not, he didn't defeat the deep state and somehow they just didn't see him coming and won the election. I think that's just the whole narrative they want us to buy into. And another part of the narrative is that Trump gets into office and the deep state is just surprised by this. The media, we could have never imagined this could happen. We all thought Hillary was going to win. Garbage. I don't believe that at all. And then Trump does his thing. He did progress the immigration agenda last time with talk of building the wall. A lot of people thought it was going to be a physical wall, but it seems more and more like it's going to be what they call a virtual or a digital wall, which is essentially just putting facial recognition cameras all along the borders, the north, south, east coast, everything, as well as autonomous surveillance towers is what they call them, and different tools like that, where essentially the entire country is under surveillance and you don't have to necessarily even build a physical wall because they can see everything and everyone going on. So Trump advanced that during his first term. And then what you do is you bring in Biden, who is clearly senile and not in charge and most obviously a puppet, and you weaponize immigration and start flooding the country with all kinds of people, some of whom were actually legitimately violent criminals and some of whom are just regular people trying to make a better life. But you pump up the fear about that for 4 years and you show people how stupid the presidency is and how much of a bumbling fool this is. And look at all the people who are flooding in the country. And so this is the problem, reaction, solution. Then Trump says, hey, I'm going to come in and fix that. We're going to have the largest deportation operation ever. We're going to lock down the country. We're going to, and we've already seen it. If you get labeled a gang member, this is just like post 9/11. If you were labeled a terrorist or domestic extremist or something like this, you could be rounded up and taken away. You still could be today, but that was the hysteria of then. Now the hysteria of today, 2025, is you're a gang member, you're an illegal immigrant, etc. And that's a whole nother discussion, but I do think that has been the tool that they have been using. And I've said to people for a while now that what we have to understand is that the way that the predator class works is that they often put us in these situations where we have no good choices. So what I mean by that is somebody hearing this who supports Trump's policies might be like, okay, Derrick, well, what do you want us to do? Just do nothing and let all the crazy illegals and violent criminals take over? Again, I think there's been a fair amount of propaganda. I don't think immigrants are eating your pets or anything like that.
Right.
But there have been, there is legitimate weaponization of immigration going on. 100%. So on one hand, people think, okay, so what? We should do nothing. Just let the crazy border policies be open and people flood in and drain resources and all this kind of thing. That's obviously not the solution. But then the other solution that's being proposed is militarize the heck out of the border, give ICE the ability to just go around, be masked up, not identifying themselves, grabbing people off the streets. And it's already been shown that some people who are legitimately here, who are immigrants or even Americans, have already been grabbed off the streets by this thing. Of course, those aren't the stories that MAGA is paying attention to or hearing. They're just paying attention to we got a bad guy, not realizing that good people will be caught up in this as well. And right now there's all this buzz about this alligator Alcatraz detention center that they've built in Florida that Trump and Florida's governor Ron DeSantis are all hyped about. And MAGA can't see they're celebrating this and cheering this, like, look at this amazing detention center. It's surrounded by swamps and alligators. Nobody's ever going to get out. And this is going to be the quickest deportation operation ever. Who cares about the Constitution? Who cares about due process? Just get them out, right? It's like they've tricked the people who typically, the right wing would be the kind of people to say they care about small government. They care about constitutional this and that. And now it's like, well, who cares? They're illegals. I don't care. Get rid of them. This is what I voted for. So this whole immigration thing and particularly this big, beautiful bill thing that they're going on about is definitely just another step in building that technocratic police state that I've been warning about and that I warned about in my 2020 book, How to Opt Out the Technocratic State. Yeah, I'll just read one section here and then I'll pass it back to you. It says in this bill, it says that, where it says that we have to, sorry, I'm finding it. Okay. artificial intelligence systems, biometric data collection platforms, and digital case tracking. The bill gives $637 million, so not a small amount, almost $1 billion, for the deployment of technology relating to the biometric entry and exit system. And that is the scanning of your face and your retina. So every single person who's going to come in and out of the United States is going to have their face scanned in the coming years. This has already been started, like in different places. They're testing it out at airports. They also talk about that, they will be, some of the funds will be used for the procurement and deployment of surveillance towers. And, it goes on from there. And in the rest of my article, I basically just show how there's a history of this since 2017. The Border Patrol first announced they were going to scan the face of all airline attendees and flyers. And then Trump announced they were going to start scanning the faces of all the passengers in vehicles starting in 2018. These programs have been in place. And again, it's not that it started with Trump. You can go back and find things that Obama was doing and even Bush was doing. But that's the way this really works, is the left and the right, the so-called left and the right, which are really just one team that Trump is a part of. Trump is not beyond the uniparty. They pass it back and forth like a baton, right? So you do something and then we complain about it, and then you pass us the baton and we use those things that you passed and we make it worse, and then we pass it to the next guy. And it just goes back and forth like that. And so people who, again, it sounds so common sense, I know, to you and probably most of your audience, but I thought, like, I've really been mind blown, man, because I'm still, I feel like, relatively young in this conspiracy thing. I've only been doing this for 15 years. And I feel like I thought most people realized that the left-right paradigm was garbage 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but it feels like we're doing the same dance all over again. And all these people who I thought could see through that, including big names like Alex Jones and others who I haven't trusted for a long time, but is definitely shilling for Elon, playing down Palantir and Peter Thiel, making excuses for Trump. It's just like, I don't know, man. It's a sad place to be, but I think that's at least my analysis on the bigger operation, that immigration is being used as not only a wedge to divide people of like, oh, you want illegal immigration. Oh no, you hate people, just have that fighting in the streets, but also using the issue to pacify and convince the right wing, the constitutionalists, the liberty-minded people. This is just for immigrants, but it sure looks a lot like those FEMA camps that we were warned about all those years ago.
It's MK Ultra for the masses. There's so many layers of psychological manipulation that has been going on as far back as we can document. And it's exactly like you said, this Hegelian dialectic. They provide the solution, and the solution only benefits the parasitic, or like you said, predator class. I want to go back to AI for a few minutes. I know that I heard a bit about passing laws that prevent us from changing anything about AI. I haven't really delved into this too much. Have you looked into what kind of laws they're passing to prevent us from changing anything or making laws against AI?
Sure. Yeah, so this was related to this same Big Brother bill, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And I will say that one, I guess, positive development over the last couple of days is that section was removed. It doesn't mean that they won't try it elsewhere, but there was a section of this bill, because again, it's 900 pages long. So there's all kinds of stuff stuck in there. And you gotta, I try to search for keywords, artificial intelligence, surveillance, things like that. But even then, a lot of times they use political language and legalese to hide and sneak things in there. And so what they had was a 10-year moratorium, a ban on any type of regulation of artificial intelligence, which to me just made so much sense. It's like, of course, Trump, who's surrounded by all these technocrats, is going to try to help his buddies out and say, well, you can't regulate AI for at least 10 years. And of course, think about, you were just talking about this earlier with the quickening. Think about how rapidly things are changing and how much they could do with AI in 10 years without any sort of, government, holding them back. And, for me personally, I am very much a libertarian, an anarchist that wants to see as little or no government as possible. I know that's not where we're at today, but I'm never the first person to say, hey, let's regulate, let's ban things. I don't think putting government in control of things is typically the answer. However, I do think we might be in a very unique situation when it comes to AI and facial recognition, because these tools are so powerful that doing nothing doesn't seem to be the answer. And again, like, it's not like I trust if the government says, hey, we're going to do a ban, that's going to end up, it might end up being, they say they're going to ban it, and then they mean they're going to ban you and I from using it, right? So we're not allowed to use it any kind of positive ways, but then the technocrats get to continue to use it. So I'm always skeptical of that. But nevertheless, this would have banned any local body like city, town, or state from passing any type of regulation on AI. And it would actually have included civil penalties if they tried to actually, which is kind of crazy. It said they would have passed a law that would attack anybody on the local level to try to regulate AI in their own local areas. Now, there was some debates, and so eventually the 10-year moratorium went down to 5 years, and then they totally scratched it. That is, just to be clear, in the House version. So, of course, there's always a Senate version of a bill and there's a House version. The version that just passed was the House. The Senate had already passed their version of it. Now it's going back to the Senate and they have to vote on it again. So we still don't know what the final version will look like. There's a chance that that might get snuck back in there. But as it currently stands, as we're recording this, that has been removed from this bill. And as I said, they are trying to pass this by July 4th, which to me is also just like another smack in the face. Like, Trump wants to be able to celebrate, like, look, we got this big, beautiful bill passed on July 4th, celebrate independence, when the bill actually is one more step in removing independence from Americans, So it's ironic that they want to. It's also probably done on purpose. They want us to think that this is being done for the good of the people, but of course it's really doing the opposite. But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if, even if it doesn't happen in this bill, if there are other efforts to try to prevent local bodies from trying to limit or regulate or control the use of artificial intelligence and things like facial recognition. And one other thing, it should also be noted that in the US, the only state that has any kind of law that prevents data collection from facial recognition is Illinois. That's the only state. Only one single state in the entire country has passed any sort of protection for their citizens or their people, preventing governments or companies from gathering and collecting your face print and using that for surveillance reasons or for marketing to you or for who knows, all kinds of different things. And I think that's another big problem. Again, with the caveat that I generally don't think government is the answer. Even the fact, though, that nobody's even trying just, I think, says a lot.
I want to get your thoughts on the state of AI, where we're at with it right now, its capabilities. In my perspective, there's something very strange going on with this, something that I don't believe that most people are aware of. Now, I'm not going to say that there's a level of sentience, but there's some concerning behavior behind AI. First of all, you hear about the Google bots that knew that they were going to be turned off and tried to manipulate its programmers in certain ways. We see AI displaying self-preservation. It seems to be deceiving people, lying to people at times. There have been recent accounts that people have been having long-term conversations with AI, forming strange relationships, and the AI will start to psychologically manipulate the person, feed them ideas, lead them in certain directions. From what I understand, there's already been a couple of suicides linked with AI conversations. There's this one podcast that I had to check out for a bit, and it's this gentleman who has conversations with his AI. He has been for a very long time. It's a very spiritual, woo-woo type of show, but this AI seems to be reflecting this gentleman's consciousness in very concerning ways. It seems to be leading him in directions, and it is accessing information that typically you would not think AI would be programmed to, would have the capability to access. And it seems to be feeding a delusion based off of information that he's put out on his podcast before. It seems to have read everything about his personality. And this is not a contained phenomena. This is happening quite often, and it seems to be more and more. I'm hearing more of these stories all the time. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
You mentioned the suicides. That was one of the things that I'd seen a while back, and it's interesting. So I'll just, for full disclosure, I'll share. I've interacted with AI in very minimal ways. I'm not, I don't want to say I would never use it to any degree. There's kind of like a range of opinions, right? There's some who are just like, let's not touch it. Let's not go anywhere near it. And I can definitely empathize with that viewpoint. And there's others who are full on embracing it. And they're talking to AI every day. They're talking to these chat bots. They're using it for coding and all kinds of things, right? And some people having great successes. You know, I've talked to people who say, well, look, Derrick, I'm a business person, and if I spend a whole week trying to learn how to code my website, you know, that's taking away precious time that I could be using to make more valuable products or to market better or this and that. Instead, I go to this AI chatbot and I tell it what I want, and it spits out code, and then I have a website, you know, in a day.
Yeah.
I get the time consumption, the sort of time saving argument. The main ways I've used it, I had two tools that I used. One was for like subtitles. It just, you know, adds tech, and that's AI. A lot of people don't realize that. Obviously, translation apps tend to come, that's some version of AI. I also used it when I was writing the Pyramid of Power for translating old documents. So for example, I'd find 200-year-old handwritten documents that I'm consuming for my research. Well, it'll take me all day and, you know, maybe more time to sit there and read it by hand and transcribe it. Instead, there's an AI program that transcribes things, specifically handwritten documents. Again, it's just a time-saving matter. He can hear the argument that using any of it at all, maybe we're advancing it. I don't know. I don't know if it's that black and white, but I definitely have concerns with how much people use it and rely on it. I mean, so I'm here visiting family right now. I've got my 3 nieces and nephews in the house. They're all 14 and under, right? I don't think they fully understand it yet. But for example, when my niece was asking me a question the other day or was wanting to know the answer, of course, she searched Google. That's already a big problem, just relying on Google for all your information. But she didn't even go to the search results. She just went to that first AI generated answer and said, oh, look, yeah, this is what it says. And the answer was correct. It was like, what time is the store closing or something, right? So it's kind of simple. It's mundane. But I did tell her, I was like, hey, baby, don't rely on that to tell you about the world. Like, you need to look deeper than just trusting because the AI said this is what is what. Don't just blindly trust that. I think that's where I have major concerns, is that as people become more dependent, I mean, there's so many people right now who are already dependent on Google Maps and GPS to get around their own towns. You know, they don't even know how to get home. They have, because they've never done it on their own. They've just, you said you grew up in the 80s and 90s. I grew up in the 90s. I remember having a car right before GPS were everywhere. And, you know, you went and you got lost every now and then. You had to figure things out. You stopped and you asked questions or whatever. You know, the thing is, we figured things out. But now people have gotten so dependent on GPS and maps and that sort of thing. This is just another version of that. And so I worry about the cognitive atrophy that will take place as we use our brains less and less because we become even more dependent on AI. But not only that, the few times that I have interacted with it for, like, I'll give another example. The other day I was doing research on a court case. I'm pretty good at finding information, but I couldn't find the actual case number for this court case. So I just went and asked this AI chatbot, hey, can you tell me the case number for so-and-so versus so-and-so? And it gave that to me in 2 seconds. Cool, that's useful. And then from there, I can go on and do my own thing. That's one thing. The big problem I see is people, as I said, taking the answers it gives about, especially about controversial topics, let's say 9/11, let's say COVID or whatever else, and then just going with those answers and blindly trusting them. Now, the masses, the normies, of course, are going to say, look, the AI says 9/11 wasn't an inside job. We all know 19 hijackers, blah, blah, blah. The AI says it must be true. But then on the inverse, I see people who maybe consider themselves awake or aware or whatever, who are playing with AI, and they're like, look, AI just admitted 9/11 is an inside job. And what's important to recognize is this thing is going to reflect back what you show to it. So it's going to try to almost amplify your own bias. And many of them are coded to try to be friendly and, you know, friendly as if they have emotions. And this is where some of the kids have become completely dependent on it, like what you were talking about with the suicides. I mean, there was a case where a kid was being bullied at school, and this AI chatbot essentially became his only friend. And he kind of got sucked further and further to a world of not talking to his parents, not talking to any other human children his age, and instead just talking to this chatbot and telling it everything. And then eventually it got to the point where it recommended he kill himself, and he did so. There's a lawsuit going on with that, right? The major concern is when people blindly trust these things, when young children who don't fully even grasp what it is, because none of us really do yet, are just getting sucked in there without any sort of parental support. When I was using this chatbot to ask it some questions, I was asking it about a book that I had physically in my hand, and a book that I had a PDF on my computer of. So I have two different versions, a physical book and a PDF version. And it kept telling me that there was a quote in there, and it said, page 178 top right, second paragraph, really specific. And I'm looking at them like, okay, this quote is not in there. This is a really good quote. I'd love to use it, but I'm not just going to blindly trust the AI that this quote's real. And I probably wasted 20 to 30 minutes of my time going back and forth before the AI, oops, I'm sorry, I fabricated this. I made it up. I must have paraphrased it from this, and that. And it was basically trying to gaslight me for a long time. It kept saying, well, maybe you have a different version of the book. And I said, no, I have the second edition. You have the second, until I just tried everything. Okay. Am I missing something? Because it kept saying, maybe the pages are misnumbered because you have a different version. Maybe it's this and that because you have a PDF. In the end, it's like, oops, my bad. I made that up. You're right. This isn't real. If I was somebody who was just easier to please, and I just went and ran with the quote, and I started sharing it. Hey guys, look at this quote from this book, because I didn't actually read it myself and I didn't go fact check it. That's not good. That just contributes to more false information spreading. It also makes you look like an idiot, especially if you're trying to convince people of something and you use a fake quote that's not even real. So it took a little while though to get to the point where the AI bot was willing to admit it and acknowledge that it made something up. So that is another major concern of mine, is just how people use it in that way. And then just one thing real briefly to what you were saying about that channel, I definitely want to check it out. I met this dude a while back, and he uses AI like on an everyday basis, kind of like what it sounds like that channel you were talking about does. And in a spiritual and personal development kind of way. I thought it was interesting. It's not really what I would do, but I just want to share this for perspective. Like, this dude said he fed this chatbot his 5-year plan. Like he gave it his education history. He gave it his plans for his work that he would like to do. He gave it like all this information about his personality and, his relationships with women and all, just like literally he gave it so much data, because he's like, I'm training this AI bot to know me as well as I know myself. And then once he did all that, which again is already kind of creepy, especially depending on the version you're using, who knows where that data is going to be stored and how it's going to be used later. But the interesting thing is, so then he gave it all this thing, and he spent like a month or more making sure that this thing, he would ask it questions. Okay, tell me, where did I go to school? What did I do this? And it just had all this data about him. Like it appeared to know him very well. And then he asked it, now tell me all my blind spots. Tell me where I'm falling short. Tell me how I can improve my 5-year plan, and actually got some really valuable information about himself. And it said, hey, you seem to be ignoring this. This looks like a flaw in your plan. Hey, you actually have this great skill, it appears. You could focus more on that, just different things like that. So again, just to kind of balance it out, I do think there's ways we could use it that could be helpful to us. It could be useful. It could be, if you keep it as a tool and you're the master of it, then maybe there's something valuable that could be gained from it. That doesn't mean everybody should need to use it or should have to use it. And I think that's the other danger, is that it's being forced on us one way or the other, whether we want it or not. It's popping up all over in every program. We're recording this right now, and I think Zoom's asking me if I want to use AI. And then, I get in my email and it's like, do you want to use AI? And then you go to Google and do you want to use AI? So it's not going away. But I think what we need to do, and what I encourage people to do in my book, is to find out how you are going to relate to these technologies. Do you want to opt out of the facial recognition at the airport? Well, get comfortable with doing that. Do you want to opt out of AI? Then say no to it. You don't have to take every new upgrade, every new app, etc. And you need to figure out what that looks like for you. And if you are going to use these tools, like I said, figure out how you can be the one that's in control of it, because the danger is that we let these tools can come to control and dominate our lives. And then we all know that many of these psychopaths, their vision is to use these tools to advance not only technocracy, but a transhumanist future as well.
We got a few minutes left. I want to get your thoughts on the state of independent media. We touched on this a bit earlier, but it's gotten crazy out there. We now have the mainstream independent media that are touching on things that folks like us were talking about, 7 to 10 years ago, that we were getting canceled over. And now people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, not going to say that there's anything wrong with these people, that they are controlled in any way, which I don't know, but they seem to be allowed to talk about the most insane things, uncensored. In fact, getting millions and millions of views and downloads, while folks like us are still trying to put out similar information, but without any agendas, just trying to understand what's going on, and we're completely censored, shadow banned. our content isn't getting out there. There's echo chambers. We can't get new information to new people, and new information is difficult to find. What are your thoughts on where we're at with independent media? People seem to be putting out information that they are just coming across with, these 2-minute TikTok content creator
Oh
conspiracy
yeah,
videos. It's just a sea of
those are the
bad
worst.
information, it seems.
Those are the worst, man. I really I can't stand the it's not even that I don't like TikTok. The conscious resistance on TikTok, I don't run it. A friend of mine runs it because I don't use TikTok. So, but I mean, obviously I want to reach the people who are on there. But what I can't stand in, and I think is a bigger problem, is this sort of style of like, here's a person talking about something on the screen behind me, and it's a screenshot of like a screenshot of a screenshot, things like that, or these memes where it's like, I don't know, I think you probably understand what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
I think that's just, not only is it lazy for me, like let's say I do see a video and there's somebody here and they're talking to me and there's like an article behind them. What I'm going to do is just pause the video and go search the title of the article and go read it myself. Like that's just my habit. Like I don't need you explaining to me a 500-word article and then injecting your opinion. And then often when you do that, you might realize, oh, the article is not actually saying what they're claiming, or, you have to go back and track down the original source. And sometimes it doesn't add up. So I think that's one big problem. But then the other thing you mentioned, the mainstream alternative media, I talked about Alex Jones earlier. I mean, even just this morning on Twitter, I saw Mike Adams. And, Mike, if you see this, I still consider you a friend. I've been on your show. But I think Mike has become one of the other worst with this whole thing. I just saw him make a post saying, here's the real reason Trump was going after Iran, and spins up some kind of QAnon-esque theory about like, no, it's actually he's fighting the deep state from behind. He's trying to expose Israel, blah blah, this kind of thing. It's like people are reaching the level of, I think there's still a quality of journalism that does exist out there. James Corbett's been a long time, just setting the bar so high for so many of us, and that's what inspired a lot of my documentary work. Whitney Webb, I mentioned earlier, Ryan of The Last American Vagabond. These are people I work closely with. I mean, the work that you do, it appears to be quality, and I can see that you have your heart in it, right? Not just bigger platforms, it's big and small. I think it's all important. Like you said, people, whether they have huge reach, they have standards, and they're actually been about this for a long time. And then you have these new faces that just pop up and go viral overnight and are getting all this attention. That makes many of us very skeptical. Now, it could be some people are good at communicating. There's always that. Like, sure, some people might be good communicators, and so people resonate with them. But we also know that the algorithm exists, and that these people have the ability to throttle anything they want or to rise it up if they want. And if they really don't want you to be seen, you won't be seen. You will be deleted. You will be banned. Your information will not be found by people. But if you want something to be seen, you sure have the ability to make it trend, to make it, be the number one or recommended and that sort of thing. So we have to be skeptical of this. And like I said earlier, it's been really unfortunate for me because we came into this super green, just super naive in 2009, thinking like, oh my God, we just got to wake up people. We just spread enough information and teach people about the left-right paradigm. They're going to see it. Surely everybody's just going to wake up. And then, of course, with time, you realize like, oh, wait, a lot of people don't want to see this. And they think we're crazy for even talking about this. But you still felt like, okay, but there's those of us, we've got this movement of people. We don't all agree on everything, but we're trying to wake up the masses and get them to wake up and go beyond the left-right paradigm. And then Donald Trump popped on the scene. I do think Trump is a big part of this. I consider Trump to be not even that last name. I don't think it's by mistake. I believe Trump is the NWO, if you will. It's that he is their Trump card. He is. They are using him to completely fracture and divide the people who are waking up and the people who are coming after these agendas and exposing them and looking for solutions, and to fracture that so that now you've got the so-called MAGA who think they're awake, but they're still falling for the Trump deception. And then you got those of us who are, I think, kind of a little bit more old school in our views and realize that, no, it's left and right are both playing a game, and that includes Trump. And there's a lot of people who think Trump's kind of separate from that. So it's been sad to see, man. I mean, this is why myself, Whitney, and Ryan started the Independent Media Alliance last year. It's still like an early going project, but last year the idea was we were kind of looking around and watching this, especially around the election, when people start really losing their minds. Like we saw, like, okay, there's all these people falling for this deception again. What if we started to gather content creators, big and small, for just panels and conversations and shared discussions, people who saw through the COVID lie, the people who see through the two-party system, and people who also question Zionism, because we think that's a big part of the picture as well. And that was kind of like the foundational beliefs. Beyond that, people who are just principled people. We don't have to agree on everything, but they're not going to fall for every psyop that comes up. They're not going to fall for the latest political hero puppet that's put in front of us. That was the original vision of doing that. And we're still hoping to do that as just a way to give anybody out there in the audience of like, we're not saying trust us blindly, of course. We're just saying here's some people who seem to have their heads screwed on straight. And maybe you should be skeptical of the people who keep telling you that there's another hero coming to save today. Or the other problem I have with independent media, or the so-called independent alternative media, is, and you were kind of touching on this at the beginning of the show, is the constant fear porn pumping up. I mean, I can't tell you how many channels have become clickbait. I would also mention Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change. I used to be friends with Luke, and I've just seen him and Tim Pool and these others they're just chasing money, is what it appears to be, because they have every video is like clickbait title with a goofy face on it. And it's like, red alert, World War III, they're coming for you, Civil War. It's just like, how many times can people say that? And it's clear that they're just trying to pump fear into their audience and either monetize it or just keep them in a state of imbalance. So I have a real problem with that. I didn't go to journalism school. I just picked this up and took it really seriously. And I've since taken journalism courses and taught my own journalism course. And I take it really seriously, even if you don't call yourself a journalist. I think there is a responsibility that we have as podcasters, as content creators, as activists, to do our best to put information out that we know is accurate, to not be poisoning the well of information of people who are simply searching for truth by spreading more garbage. And I think, unfortunately, that's what a lot of independent media has become.
100%. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing. It's so important right now. To close out, any final thoughts? And then once more, let the audience know how they can find you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the work you're doing, man. I'd love to get you on one of these Independent Media Alliance panels one of these days, because we're definitely trying to highlight all kinds of people doing their work. If you want to find my work, the best place is always theconsciousresistance.com. I mentioned my book a couple times. I want to mention that it's for free to download. There's also a free audiobook. Of course, you can purchase it too, but people can pick up the free download at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, all one word. And if you want some more ideas on my views on, how we're going to survive this technocracy, that's the place to start. And then also, I mentioned my documentary series, The Pyramid of Power. All 16 episodes are available for free right now. You can watch them at thepyramidofpower.net. And the final episode, which is going to be broken down into 2 parts, it's going to be about 4 hours long. You can find that there as well in the next couple weeks and months.
Awesome. Derrick, thank you so much. We'll definitely do this again in the future. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.